The story begins on an ordinary evening in a busy city where life moved fast, and people rarely noticed each other beyond quick glances and polite exchanges. And inside a quiet, elegant restaurant, a man entered alone, carrying the calm confidence of someone used to responsibility and pressure. Yet there was something reserved about him that kept attention away as he took a table near the center of the room and observed the space around him with thoughtful eyes while waiters moved smoothly between tables, and soft music filled the air, creating a warm atmosphere where conversations blended into a gentle background sound. And among the staff was a young waitress who had learned to read people well through years of service. And she noticed the man not because of his clothing or posture, but because of the way he seemed slightly distant, as if carrying a private concern that had nothing to do with the menu or the setting. And when she approached his table, she greeted him politely and offered assistance, as she did with every guest. Yet the man did not respond with words, and instead raised his hands slowly and began forming careful gestures that immediately caught her attention, because they were not random movements, but clear, deliberate signs meant to communicate. And she froze for a brief moment, processing what she was seeing before realizing he was using sign language to ask for help. And this unexpected moment shifted the rhythm of the evening, as she adjusted her posture, leaned in slightly, and focused on understanding him, while the rest of the restaurant continued unaware. And the man's expression carried both calm and vulnerability, showing that despite his powerful position in life, he was in that moment simply another person trying to be understood. And the waitress responded gently, doing her best to follow his signs even though she was not fully fluent, and through patience and mutual effort, they managed a simple exchange where he explained that he needed assistance with something beyond food. And as they communicated, it became clear that this interaction held deeper meaning for him, because he was stepping outside the role he lived in daily, where people listened to his words and followed his decisions, and here he relied on silent gestures and trust in a stranger. And the waitress sensed this shift and felt a quiet respect growing within her, as she realized that the man before her carried a story that was about to unfold in ways no one in the room could yet imagine. And this moment marked the beginning of a chain of events rooted in empathy, humility, and an unexpected connection that would soon draw the attention of everyone present and change the night into something unforgettable and meaningful for all involved. And the evening that began as routine slowly transformed into a shared human experience, driven by understanding rather than status. And the silence between signs spoke louder than words ever could, as the first chapter of this real-life story took shape through a simple act of reaching out without sound and finding someone willing to listen. Without judgment, the second part of the story continues as the waitress takes a slow breath and steadies herself, because she understands that this moment requires patience and care. And she gestures back using simple signs she learned long ago from a cousin who was hearing impaired. And although her movements are not perfect, they carry sincerity, which the man notices immediately, and his face softens with relief as he realizes he is not alone in his silence. And around them, the restaurant hums with quiet activity. Glasses clink softly, chairs shift, and low conversations blend into a calm rhythm, yet at their table time seems to slow as both focus fully on each other. And the man carefully explains through signs that he needs access to the piano in the corner of the room. And this request surprises her, because the piano is usually reserved for scheduled performers and special evenings, and she hesitates not because she doubts him, but because she knows the rules and responsibilities placed on her, and she gently signs back, asking why and what he plans to do. And he pauses for a moment, then places his hand over his chest, and signs that music is the only way he can express something important tonight. And his eyes carry a weight that suggests memory, emotion, and urgency, and the waitress feels a quiet pull of empathy, because she recognizes the look of someone holding something inside for too long, and she nods slowly, signaling that she will speak to the manager. And as she walks away, she glances back at him, noticing how he sits, with his hands folded calmly yet tightly, as if holding himself together. And she approaches the manager, explaining in hushed tones that the guest communicates through sign language and wishes to play the piano. And at first the manager reacts with hesitation, citing policy, timing, and the presence of other guests, yet the waitress insists, gently describing the man's demeanor and sincerity. And after a moment of consideration, the manager agrees to allow a brief performance under the condition that it does not disturb the atmosphere. And the waitress returns to the table, her steps slightly faster now, and signs the good news. And the man exhales, visibly gratitude spreading across his face, as he bows his head slightly in thanks. And as he stands to move toward the piano, a few nearby guests begin to notice the shift in energy, sensing that something unusual is unfolding, and whispers ripple softly across tables, not out of judgment, but curiosity. And the piano, which had been a silent decorative piece, now becomes the center of quiet attention, and the man takes his seat, adjusting the bench with practiced ease. And the waitress steps back, standing nearby, unsure of what will happen next, yet feeling honored to witness it. And before he begins, he looks around the room, making brief eye contact with those closest, then closes his eyes and places his hands on the keys. And in that still moment, the restaurant seems to hold its breath, because even without a single word spoken, there is a shared understanding that something meaningful is about to be expressed. And this second chapter builds the bridge between a simple request and an unfolding revelation, where kindness, trust, and the courage to be seen begin to transform an ordinary night into a collective experience. And as the man prepares to let his music speak for him, the waitress realizes that her choice to listen and help has opened a door not just for him, but for everyone present, and the quiet anticipation in the room signals that what comes next will resonate far beyond the walls of the restaurant and remain etched in memory long after the final note fades. As the third part unfolds, the man begins to play, and the first notes flow softly yet with intention, filling the room with a warmth that immediately quiets conversations and draws every ear toward the piano, and his hands move with confidence, revealing years of discipline and passion, as the melody builds slowly, telling a story without words. And the waitress watches closely, realizing that this is not a casual performance but something deeply personal and emotional, and guests who moments ago were focused on their meals now sit still, feeling an unspoken pull toward the sound. And the music carries a blend of sadness, hope, and strength, suggesting a life shaped by challenges and perseverance. And with each progression, the man leans slightly into the keys, as if releasing memories that have lived inside him for years, and his expression remains calm yet intense, showing focus rather than showmanship, and the restaurant staff pauses, their movement instinctively sensing the importance of the moment. And even the manager stands near the entrance, observing with surprise and respect as the performance continues. And the piano resonates through the space, transforming the elegant setting into something more intimate and human, and a woman at a nearby table wipes her eyes, quietly unsure why the music affects her so deeply, while a child listens wide-eyed, captivated by the harmony, and the waitress feels a tightness in her chest as she understands that this music is the man's voice, the way he speaks to the world when words fail him. And she recalls the gentle humility he showed earlier when asking for permission, realizing how different this moment feels from the power he likely holds in his professional life. And the melody shifts into a brighter passage, lifting the mood and hinting at resilience and growth. And the room responds with subtle changes in posture and expression as people lean forward and breathe more slowly, united by the shared experience. And the man's fingers glide effortlessly across the keys, showing technical skill balanced with emotional restraint. And it becomes clear that he is not playing to impress but to connect. And this realization deepens the impact on everyone listening, and time seems to stretch as the music continues uninterrupted, creating a space where social roles fade and only emotion remains. And when the final sequence approaches, the man slows slightly, allowing each note to linger and settle into the hearts of those present, and the waitress senses that the end is near and feels both gratitude and reluctance, because she knows moments like this are rare. And when the last note finally sounds, it does not end abruptly, but fades gently into silence that feels full rather than empty, and no one moves immediately because the stillness itself has become part of the story. And in that silence, the third chapter closes with a room transformed by sound, empathy, and the courage of one man who chose to let his truth be heard through music rather than words. And the waitress understands that whatever happens next this night has already changed something within everyone who witnessed it. When the silence finally breaks, it does so gently, as people begin to breathe again and shift in their seats. And the emotional weight of what they experience settles slowly across the room, and the waitress notices how several guests exchange looks of quiet understanding, as if they have shared something personal without ever speaking. And the man remains seated at the piano moment longer, his hands resting lightly on the keys, his shoulders relaxed, yet his posture suggests release, as though he has set something down that he carried for years. And then he stands and turns toward the room, offering a small respectful nod, not seeking praise, but acknowledging the shared moment. And the response comes naturally as applause rises, not loud or chaotic, but steady and sincere, growing as more people join. And the sound fills the space with appreciation rather than spectacle, and the waitress feels warmth spread through her chest as she claps softly, realizing that she played a role in allowing this moment to exist. And the manager steps forward, offering a grateful smile, recognizing that rules sometimes bend in the presence of humanity. And the man walks back toward his table. And as he passes nearby guests, some place a hand over their heart, others nod, and one elderly man stands briefly as a sign of respect. And the waitress meets him halfway, unsure how to respond, yet wanting to express what words cannot, and she signs a simple thank you, and he responds with a smile that carries gratitude, humility, and relief. And he then signs back, explaining that he rarely plays in public anymore, and that tonight he felt compelled because the piano reminded him of someone important. And the waitress listens attentively, sensing that this story reaches deeper than the performance itself. And he signs that he learned music as a child during a time when he felt unheard and isolated, and that the piano became his way of speaking when life felt overwhelming. And as his career grew and responsibilities increased, he slowly set that part of himself aside, choosing practicality over passion and leadership over vulnerability. And tonight marked the first time in many years that he allowed that voice to return. And the waitress feels the honesty of his admission and realizes that despite his success, he has carried quiet sacrifices that few people see. And around them, the restaurant slowly resumes movement, yet the atmosphere remains changed, softer, more connected, and conversations restart with lower volume and thoughtful tones. And people speak about the music not as entertainment, but as something that reminded them of their own hidden parts. And the man sits back down at his table, and the waitress brings him water, noticing how calm he seems now, as if attention has lifted. And she signs, asking if he feels better, and he nods, placing his hand over his chest to show that something heavy has eased. And this fourth chapter unfolds not through dramatic action, but through reflection, shared understanding, and the recognition that moments of true expression can reshape a person from within and influence everyone around them without a single spoken word. And the waitress understands that what amazed people was not only the skill itself, but the courage it took to reveal a part of oneself that had been silent for so long. and the evening continues carrying a sense of quiet reverence as the story moves forward shaped by empathy connection. The lasting echo of music that spoke for a man who finally allowed himself to be heard as the fifth part unfolds. The waitress remains near the table not out of duty, but out of genuine concern and curiosity, because the man before her no longer feels like just another guest, and she senses that the story behind his silence and music is still revealing itself. And as she gently checks if he needs anything else, he signs that he would like to share something if she has time, and she nods, pulling a chair slightly closer while keeping a respectful distance, and he explains through calm, deliberate signs that he is the chief executive officer of a large company known publicly for innovation and strength and leadership. And this revelation surprises her not because of disbelief, but because of how different he feels from the image she associates with such roles. And he signs that his life is usually filled with meetings, decisions, expectations, and constant communication, yet very little true connection, and he spends his days speaking yet rarely feels heard, and she listens attentively, realizing the quiet irony in his words. And he continues, explaining that he lost his hearing partially as a child due to an illness. And while he learned to adapt and succeed, he often felt separated from others, and learned to rely on discipline, intelligence, and control to navigate a world that moved too fast for pauses and understanding. And the piano became his refuge during those early years, a place where he could express emotions that had no outlet, and as adulthood arrived, he buried that part of himself under ambition, responsibility, and survival, and success followed, yet fulfillment slowly faded. And tonight he had come to the restaurant not to celebrate or conduct business, but to sit with his thoughts. And when he saw the piano, he felt an urge he could not ignore, and asking for help through sign language felt like stepping back into a version of himself he had long neglected. And the waitress feels the weight of his honesty, realizes that his performance was not a display of talent, but an act of healing and courage. And she signs back, sharing briefly that her cousin taught her basic sign language, and that she often felt frustrated that more people did not take the time to learn it. And he smiles warmly, acknowledging how her willingness to understand changed the course of his night, and possibly more. And around them, a few guests continue to glance over with curiosity, not recognizing his professional status, but sensing that something meaningful is being exchanged. And the manager approaches quietly, offering compliments and expressing gratitude for the unexpected beauty the moment brought to the restaurant. And the man signs his thanks and explains that he did not intend to draw attention, but simply needed to speak through music. And the manager nods, showing respect rather than concern, and offers to keep the piano available anytime he visits. And as the manager leaves, the waitress feels a sense of pride and humility, knowing she helped bridge a gap between silence and expression. And the man signs that he is grateful not just for permission to play, but for being treated like a person rather than a title. And this statement lingers with her because it reflects a truth many people overlook, and the atmosphere of the restaurant continues to soften as laughter and conversation slowly return, yet there is a new layer of awareness among those present. And this fifth chapter deepens the story by revealing the man behind the skill and behind the amazement, showing that what truly moved people was not his position or talent alone, but his willingness to be vulnerable and authentic in a world that often rewards only strength and certainty. And as the waitress stands to return to her duties, she realizes that she will remember this interaction not as part of her job, but as a reminder that every person carries unseen stories waiting for a moment of understanding to bring them to light. And the man watches her go, feeling lighter than he years, because for once he allowed himself to be fully seen, not as a leader or performer, but simply as a human being finding his voice again through shared humanity and quiet connection. In the sixth part of the story, the evening continues, but the connection formed earlier does not fade, and the waitress returns to her work with a different awareness, noticing guests more closely and treating each interaction with added care, while the man sits quietly, no longer restless, and observes the room with softened eyes and a relaxed posture, as if something inside him has finally settled. And nearby guests begin subtle conversations about the music, sharing personal reflections and memories it stirred. And one couple speaks about dreams they postponed, while another guest mentions a passion they once abandoned for practicality. And these quiet exchanges ripple through the restaurant, creating a shared sense of reflection. And the manager notices this shift and realizes that the atmosphere has changed in a positive way, where people feel more open and present. And the man finishes his drink slowly and signs to the waitress when she passes that he will be leaving soon, and she nods, feeling a surprising sense of reluctance, because she knows moments like this rarely repeat. And before he stands to leave, he signs one final message, explaining that tonight reminded him of who he was before titles, expectations, and fear shaped his choices, and he thanks her again for seeing him without judgment. And she responds with a sincere smile and signs that she is glad she listened and learned. And as he rises to go, several guests look up instinctively and offer small gestures of respect and warmth, and the man acknowledges them quietly without drawing attention. And when he reaches the door, he pauses briefly, glancing back at the piano, then exits into the night carrying a renewed sense of clarity and purpose. And the waitress watches him leave, understanding that while their interaction was brief, its impact was lasting. And this sixth chapter shows how one honest moment can influence not just two people, but an entire room, and leave behind a subtle transformation that lingers long after the person is gone. And the restaurant returns to its routine, yet something invisible has shifted, reminding everyone present that true amazement often comes from authenticity, courage, And the simple act of being understood without words. Days later, the seventh part of the story unfolds beyond the restaurant walls, as the waitress finds herself thinking often about that evening while moving through her normal routine, and she notices that the memory of the silent conversation and the music has stayed with her more strongly than most interactions she has had in years. And it begins to influence the way she listens to people, noticing tone, posture, and emotion rather than just words. And at the same time, the man returns to his demanding life as a CEO, yet something within him has shifted, and during meetings he feels a growing discomfort with the pace and surface-level communication that once felt normal, and he catches himself reflecting on the honesty of that night, and the relief he felt after playing the piano. And this reflection leads him to make small changes, starting with setting aside time each evening to reconnect with music, not for performance or praise, but for personal balance and expression. And as he plays alone, he realizes how much clarity it brings to his thinking, and how it softens the constant pressure he carries. And this renewed connection slowly affects his leadership style as well, because he begins to listen more patiently and communicate with greater empathy. And his colleagues notice subtle changes in his presence, describing him as more grounded and approachable, without knowing the reason. And one afternoon, he receives an internal report about employee burnout and mental fatigue. And instead of approving standard solutions, he requests a meeting to discuss deeper causes and support systems. And during that meeting, he surprises his team by sharing a personal story about losing connection with his own voice and how rediscovering it helped him regain balance. And while he does not mention the restaurant or the waitress, he speaks openly about vulnerability and expression, and the importance of being understood, and this openness creates a ripple effect, encouraging others to share their own struggles and ideas. And the company begins exploring initiatives that support mental well-being, creativity, and inclusion, including accessibility awareness and communication training. And unknowingly, the influence of one quiet night continues to spread through professional spaces, affecting lives far removed from that original moment. And meanwhile, the waitress enrolls in a local course to improve her sign language skills, feeling motivated to communicate better with guests who may need it. And she finds joy in learning something that connects people rather than separates them. And she shares her progress with her cousin, who encourages her proudly. And as weeks pass, she encounters other guests who use sign language and feels more confident and fulfilled in her role. And although she never sees the man again, she recognizes his impact in the way she approaches her work and her understanding of people. And this seventh chapter reveals how a brief encounter rooted in empathy can extend far beyond its original setting, shaping choices, growth, and awareness in ways that are quiet yet powerful. And both lives continue forward on separate paths, yet connected by a shared moment that altered their perspectives and reminded them that when someone is truly seen and heard, even in silence, the effect can reach further than either person ever expects. And the amazement people felt that night was not limited to applause, but lived on through meaningful change, unseen by most yet deeply felt by those who experienced it. And through these ongoing shifts, the story proves that real-life moments do not always end when the room empties, but often begin their carrying forward through intention, reflection, and the courage to listen differently in a world full noise. In the eighth part, time continues to pass, and the impact of that single evening becomes clearer through quiet outcomes rather than dramatic events. And the waitress gains confidence not only in sign language, but in her sense of purpose, realizing that her work holds opportunities to create understanding and dignity for others. And she begins to notice how often people feel invisible even in crowded spaces. And she makes small efforts to acknowledge guests more thoughtfully, which earns her trust and appreciation. And this change does not go unnoticed by her manager, who later offers her a role assisting with staff training focused on guest awareness and accessibility. And she accepts with pride, knowing the seed of this growth was planted that night. And elsewhere, the man integrates music more deeply into his life, attending small private recitals and supporting programs that promote arts and inclusion without public attention. And he feels a renewed alignment between his values and actions, and while he never seeks recognition for these efforts, he feels more whole than he has in years. And occasionally, when he plays the piano alone, he remembers the restaurant not as a stage, but as a turning point where he chose honesty over restraint and connection over silence. And though their lives move forward separately, the shared moment continues to influence their decisions, reinforcing the idea that brief encounters can quietly reshape direction, purpose, and understanding in lasting ways. And this part of the story shows that amazement does not always arrive loudly, but often settles gently into daily life, guiding people toward more compassionate choices and meaningful growth without ever needing to be named or explained as. The ninth part of the story unfolds the connection between that single evening and the present becomes clearer through reflection rather than direct contact. And both individuals find themselves changed in ways that feel permanent and quietly meaningful. And the waitress, now more confident and grounded, often thinks about how listening without assumptions opened a door she did not know existed. And she realizes that the most powerful moments in her life have come not from grand achievements, but from simple choices to be patient, kind, and present. And this understanding influences her relationships outside of work as well, because she listens more carefully to friends and family, noticing emotions beneath words, and offering support without trying to fix everything. And people around her begin to describe her as someone who makes them feel seen and safe, and she recognizes this quality as a gift shaped by that night. and she carries it forward with intention and pride, and meanwhile the man continues to lead his company with a different internal compass, guided less by pressure and more by purpose. And he becomes known not only for strategic brilliance, but for ethical leadership and human-centered decision-making. And he quietly champions policies that support inclusion, accessibility, and creative expression within the organization, ensuring that voices of all kinds are valued, including those that communicate differently, and employees feel a subtle shift in culture where openness replaces fear and collaboration replaces isolation. And while many never know the personal reason behind these changes, they feel the benefit in their daily work and well-being. And occasionally the man attends small music gatherings where he plays alongside others, not as a performer, but as a participant. And in these moments he feels equal, connected, and alive. And he understands that reclaiming this part of himself has allowed him to lead with greater integrity and balance. And sometimes late at night, he reflects on how easily that moment could have passed unnoticed if the waitress had not taken the time to understand his signs. And he feels deep gratitude for the reminder that leadership does not always come from authority but often from vulnerability and trust. And though their lives never cross again directly, the shared experience continues to ripple outward, influencing countless unseen interactions, decisions, and moments of empathy. And this ninth chapter highlights that the true power of what happened next was not the immediate amazement of the audience, but the lasting transformation that followed, quietly shaping character, values, and choices. And it shows that real-life stories often reach their deepest meaning long after the applause fades, living on through growth, awareness, and the ongoing decision to honor one's authentic voice and to recognize it in others. And as both individuals move forward, they carry with them an unspoken understanding that connection born from silence and sincerity can leave an imprint that time does not erase, and that a single act of listening can alter the direction of a life in ways that are profound, enduring, and deeply human. In the final part of the story, the meaning of that evening fully settles into perspective, not as a dramatic event, but as a quiet turning point that shaped two lives in lasting ways. And the waitress, now standing confidently in her role, understands that her growth did not come from learning signs alone, but from learning how to truly see people beyond assumptions, routines, and surface interactions. And she carries this awareness into every part of her life, choosing empathy over impatience and presence over distraction. And she recognizes that her sense of purpose was strengthened the moment she chose to listen without hesitation. And over time, she becomes someone others seek out, not for answers, but for understanding. And this gives her fulfillment deeper than any promotion or praise. And she often reflects on how a single decision to care changed her path, reminding her that meaning is built through small intentional acts rather than grand plans. And on the other side of the city, the man continues his journey with a restored sense of balance and integrity, no longer divided between who he is and who he presents to the world. And by allowing music and vulnerability back into his life, he leads with greater clarity, compassion, and authenticity. And he finds that success feels different now, less heavy, more aligned, and more human. And though he never publicly shares the story of that night, he honors it privately by continuing to make choices that support expression, inclusion, and dignity. And in quiet moments at the piano, he feels grounded and complete, knowing that he reclaimed a part of himself he once believed had no place in his adult life. And the memory of the waitress remains not as a face or a name, but as a symbol of what becomes possible when someone chooses understanding over indifference. And as time moves forward, both lives unfold independently, yet shaped by the same truth that connection does not require shared history, status, or even spoken language, but only the willingness to meet another person with respect and openness. And this realization becomes the lasting message of the story, that what amazed everyone that night was not only a piano skill or an unexpected act, but the reminder that humanity reveals itself most clearly in moments of sincere listening and quiet courage. And the story ends not with closure, but with continuity, because the effects of that single interaction live on through choices, relationships, and unseen kindnesses, spreading quietly into the world, and proving that real-life stories often reach their most powerful ending when they inspire ongoing change rather than final resolution. And in this way, the night that once stunned a room continues to resonate through lives shaped by empathy, authenticity, and the simple act of allowing someone to be heard even in silence.